All right, you guys, let's talk about why an ordinary life might just be the place that God does his biggest and his best work. Because you see, there's this tiny little sneaky belief that creeps into our minds as followers of Jesus that says that an extraordinary life or a life of faith has to look extraordinary. It sounds like my impact has to be big. My calling has to be some sign from heaven. If I'm going to do anything for God that's noticeable, it has to be noticeable. It's not that we want to live before other people, but there's this expectation that it has to be big in some way. And what happens is that it starts to create this pressure, like where we have this belief or some idea in our head that ordinary is in opposition to living a life wholeheartedly for God. And so that belief creates this pressure that actually disables us and keeps us spiritually, emotionally, and in many ways, we just in the way that we live our life, we get stuck doing nothing because it feels like, well, I can't really do something until I'm able to do more than what I'm doing. And it might not be that you expect yourself to be one of the greatest and best and well-known Christians on the planet, but you still might have this idea where you expect your life to be a little bit more than it is. And that idea, that belief, is keeping you from doing anything. And before we go on, I want to invite you, if you do have something that you know what it is you want to do, it's just not happening, then grab the On Purpose Planner in comments or notes below this video, and totally free, download it, jump in, and let's make your work happen in a totally ordinary, comfortable, and doable way. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more about the hidden belief, this idea that life has to be extraordinary. So years ago, I think this was one of those things that I've kind of, it's been like a slow change and shift over many years. But at some point, or many points along the way, in relation to feeling or living with this pressure that I have to, my life has to be extraordinary if it's going to matter in God's eyes. And like, I know that's not true, right? In my head, I know that. And yet there's this like pressure that you can't quite put your finger on, that's always there pushing you and always telling you that you're not doing enough. But I realized that when I started to kind of articulate it or say, okay, you know what, maybe I'm not called to something extraordinary. Maybe I just need to settle for ordinary and just learn to love God in the ordinary. And the fact that I used for years the word settle has that's the key word here. There is no settling. When you see, what I've learned to say instead of settling for an ordinary life is that I am hands-on, embracing, loving God and loving others in the midst of an ordinary life. Like I really, now I don't care if my life looks ordinary or extraordinary. That's not a result to reach for. It's just like, I mean, who measures that anyway? And so it's sort of like one of those things where I'm like, my life's going to look like how it's going to look. And I'm just going to learn to love God in the small. And because in the midst of working through this pressure that I was feeling and that you might be feeling, or maybe you felt this for years and you've never been able to put your finger on it either. But in the midst of working through this, I really had to start to see how in the Bible, everything is small. Like it's like you say yes to the small, you say yes to that next step, you say yes to loving the person in front of you and helping the just whoever's in front of you, right? And whatever God has given you, you learn how to work with that really well. And then if he gives you more, then you work with more. And if he doesn't give you more or he takes them away, then you work with what that is. There's something about that when we stop reaching for what we don't have. And I'm just going to clarify here, I'm not saying like, if you are called to start a business and you're going from having no business, you have to reach for things in order to accomplish that. So I'm not saying don't reach for things. I'm I am saying embrace what God has given you. If there's something on your heart that you know you want to do, it's that thing that won't leave you away, then do it, make it happen, but also download the On Purpose Planner in the description below, because I'm here to help you do that, to stop living with this pressure, to stop living with this feeling that your life has to be extraordinary, and instead just start where you are and follow God where He's leading you, and let that be this small thing. But really watch because if you feel like I felt that you have to settle for ordinary, that feeling of settling, it's like, well, then I'm giving up. I'm letting go of God. I'm letting go of where I believe that He wants to take me. And so I had to just like learn to reframe that and start to see that following God, like there are no, like miracles happen, but there aren't these big leaps where all of a sudden I don't know, there's just this like idea of we're just going to, once we really get it, or once we are reading our Bible well, we're just going to become this amazing Christian who just has all the right responses and right reactions, and we can share the gospel with anybody. We just like do life right. And that's just not the case. We're broken people following a perfect God who is a really good, faithful leader. You might have heard me talk before about the parable of the talents. It is one of my favorites that I come back to. And it's one of my favorites from a very sobering angle. But so in Matthew 25, Jesus tells a parable about a master who went away. To one servant he gave 5 talents, to the next one he gave 2, to the last one he gave 1. You've probably heard it before. If not, feel free to go read it. But so the first servant, while the master was away on a long journey, being a picture of Jesus, the first servant took his 5 talents, went out and made 5 more talents. This one who was given 2 did the same. He went out and made 2 more talents. The third one is the one that I want to point out here, because this is the one where, oh my goodness, there's so many times in my life where I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so easy to fall into this idea that sounds like wisdom, but it's not. Okay, so the third one buried his talent. When his master came home, he said, I knew you to be harsh, that you gather where you don't scatter seed. And he said a few other things, but basically it's like he acted on what he believed about his master, about his character. And so he made the choice. He absolutely took action. He took the action based on who he believed his master to be and his perception of his master. And his master was not happy at all. But the thing that I want to say is that we all do exactly the same. And the first 2, the servant who got 5 talents and the one that got 2, they also acted on the character of their master and how they've related to their master and who they believe their master to be. And they made choices based on that. But for this, so they all made choices based on who they believe their master to be, which we do the same. As followers of Jesus, you can't just say, I know you're good. I know you're generous. I know that you want to heal the broken and you want to feed the hungry. It's like, what do we really believe about him? And so we are either going to bury our talent, and this can look like just saying, when God wants to call me, he'll let me know. And there might be a time where, okay, that I'm not, someone might say that, and I'm not saying like, just always assume that's wrong, but we really have to guard our hearts against this idea where we're like hands off, thinking, well, if it's supposed to happen, God's going to make it happen. But for now, I'm just so that I don't make any mistakes, right? Because sometimes we're so afraid of making mistakes that we hold ourselves back, so that when we stand before God, we can say, I didn't want to screw anything up, so I made sure to wait for your timing, and I waited for you. And there is a waiting, but there's a waiting where you're doing everything on your part to make it happen. And then there's a waiting that is lived out of fear. that's the one I'm trying to come against, that this fear or this wrong idea of Jesus's character, of who he is, of who the Father is, depending on how we see him and how his value system, the way he runs his kingdom, just his character, the way he relates to us or to others, we are going to make huge life choices based on our perception of who Jesus is. And we are either going to bury, like you're going to bury your talent one way or another, and by talent, it's what has God given you that you can be responsible over and responsible with, and how can you use what he's given you, whether it's the way you think, it's the money he's given you, the time, the resources, the place where you live. Like it's endless. Once you start to kind of like can take stock of everything in your life and say, okay, well, how could I use this random thing for the glory of God and for his kingdom and for the good of others? It's endless, right? Just the ideas are endless once you start to enter into that conversation. And so my encouragement to you is to really take seriously what God has given you. Don't worry about what he hasn't given you, right? Don't worry about this pressure to live some huge, extraordinary, crazy life and feel, because even the idea that our life has to be, and I lived with this pressure for a long time. The idea that our life has to be huge and extraordinary and noticeable in some way before we can really live for God, that is a belief that is going to cause us to bury our talent, what God has given us, in the ground, so that when he comes back, we're like, here, I didn't mess it up, basically. And what? I don't know where I was going to go with that one. But okay, so let's just talk more about how in God's kingdom, there's this value of being faithful with the small things and of doing in secret, like of living life and making choices and doing things well in secret when nobody can see you besides God. And that reminded me about, or I guess it just made me think about, like if you're the CEO of a company and you like, who's the person that you're going to value? It's going to be the one, if you care about character and if you care about having quality people, then, and if you care about the heart and just not how good someone's stage presentation is, you're going to be paying attention to the person who does the small jobs well, regardless of who's in the room or if anybody's in the room, versus the person who changes character based on who's in the room. It's like, oh, this important person's here, so I've got to put on my A game. And some people will do that without even realizing they're doing that, right? Their life is so performance based, so they don't care about doing the small things well. They don't care about who they are when only God sees them. But in God's kingdom, he values what we do in secret before an audience of one. And there's so much about that. When you start to see that in the Bible, you're just like, there is this huge invitation to loving God and loving others in the small, in the ordinary, in just, okay. And this is what I really want to say, is that it's like an extraordinary life. Not that, okay, I'm using this phrase without, I wanted to clarify kind of what I meant, but let's say you had an extraordinary life. You were doing it all, you're on the stages, whatever that looks like. And you're kind of like, it's big and it's wonderful and it's great. But that life doesn't make room to see the one that's in front of you, that God's put in front of you. It doesn't leave room to take the time to have the conversation, to hear and listen and respond and grieve and laugh and just be with the person, whoever that is, whether that's your child or that's your mom or that is your friend or that's a stranger. Extraordinary lives don't leave room for the things that God really values. And so when we let go of that extraordinary, like pressure to be extraordinary and to do something big, and instead just say, you know what? I'm just going to be faithful with what he's given me. And that might end up being really big. I'm not saying it has to, like, don't make something small if God has called you to something big. But what I'm saying is to deal with this pressure, this belief system behind the scenes that is pushing you to do it. Because even as I've learned over the years to keep on stepping out and keep on saying yes to what God has invited me to, and with doing this YouTube channel, there have been so many beliefs where I've had to let go of this pressure. I've had to let go of another belief. I've had to let go of feeling like God doesn't see and he doesn't care until I've figured it out. And until then it's like, he couldn't care less if this works or not. And so I've got to like make it big enough so that I get his attention. That's a bad belief. Like, I don't want to believe that. and yet it's like, okay, I do. So I've got to come back to the truth. And what does he actually say? And what are the values of his kingdom? So all that to say, I would just encourage you to, if this is resonating, let me know in the comments below. Like, is this resonating? Does this make sense? Have you been stuck feeling like that either you have to settle for an ordinary life or you have to like do something big and impressive, and what has shifted for you? So let me know in the comments. And also, if you do have something you want to do and it's just not happening, then grab the On Purpose planner in the description below, and I'm going to help you navigate that. And is there anything else that I want to say lastly? I guess just instead of settling for ordinary, embrace it with like open arms and just love your ordinary life, and that the small, and start to just talk to Jesus about the small things and the boring things and the messy things, and where maybe you have one talent that he's given you, or maybe you've got half a talent and you're like, okay, well, you know what? This is what I have. Help me be creative with how I can use this for you. But also ask him for ideas, but also come up with ideas yourself and bring something to the table. Like, take initiative with what he's given you, with the things that you see that bother you, that you want to do something about, or the things that move you that you want to do something about. And then just bring something like, what do you want to do to the table? That's your calling. That's what for most of us, that's what we're called to do. We're not going to have some big sign from heaven. It's just, what is on your heart to do? Go and do it, and he will direct your steps. As long as you keep giving. Okay, the verse is right above my pantry. It's, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. I'll leave you with that. So, lastly, remember to read the Bible, get lost in the story of God, and play your part. And I will talk to you soon. There is a blue triangle on the floor. Is that going to bug me? Let's go move it. Okay, blue triangle gone. Not cleaned up, just gone out of the picture. Okay.